Mark, we're having a very productive, interesting conversation. Of course, that's why I asked you to join me here on Zoom. We've talked a lot about the challenges, which are immense. Let's turn a little bit more towards practical. What can we do, both at the individual level, the neighborhood, the community, the regional level? Of course, food is an enormous issue, and as you pointed out, our food system is like, as others have pointed out, like eating oil. That's kind of what our food system is. Let's talk a little bit about food localization. What do you mean? What's the term food localization? Why is that important?
Well, food relocalization is about having food grown where people eat. And it's not just a boutique thing where you can go to a trendy restaurant and they have the farm to table. It's also that it takes a lot of energy to move food all over the place. We are totally dependent on food delivery trucks. And the idea of eating food out of season, to eat fresh strawberries in the wintertime, thousands of kilometers away from the farm, that's a relatively recent temporary development in our history. Uh, in 1859, when the first oil well was dug in Pennsylvania, there were 1.2 billion people in the world. We have 8 billion now. And the fossil fuels made this possible. Solar panels are not going to power transcontinental shipment of food, but local food, whether from your garden or a farmer's market or just a store that is sensitive to local farms, almost always tastes better. We all know the example of tomatoes that have traveled thousands of miles versus tomatoes from your garden or your neighbor's garden, and there's no difference. Anybody can tell the difference between fresh food and stale food. If you don't like tomatoes, there's plenty of other examples. Now, growing a garden yourself is not a sufficient response for the scale of what we're up against. But if everybody does something, doesn't mean everybody needs a garden of their own, but everybody eats. And if you don't have a garden, or you don't have place for a garden, or you don't have the time for a garden, support people who do. Support local farmers, support people in the community setting up community garden space. Energy efficiency. There's limits to what you can do on your own, especially if you're a renter. But even if you're a house owner, being more efficient in your demand, insulation in your home if you're a homeowner, if you're driving, combine trips, learn to have less demand on the system, because we're at the point where this is starting to be forced by external circumstances, by financial limits. The cost of the price of energy going up is forcing the amount of use of that energy to go down. That makes highway expansions unnecessary. It also means we're going to have to shift the way we live, whether we want to or not. Being more proactive can make it easier physically and psychologically, but it's not a choice whether we choose to do this or not. It's more, can we choose to accept these shifts in ways that are more palatable? It's not an option to keep growing or not. It's more of an option of how we learn to do more with less. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean austerity. There's a lot of life-affirming behaviors we can have in our neighborhood, in our communities, in our regions, that don't involve shopping as a recreational activity or piling up more stuff that we can't afford. But this requires a cultural shift much more than a technological shift. And we all know this in our different ways. none of this is new information.
Right. Well, these are conversations people are having more and more all over the world. And the old adage, the best things in life are free, we could discuss that. But most of the things that people like, they like security, they like having their friends around, they like a few compliments now and then. Um, when we start to discover that our consumer culture and the dynamics of capitalism, or even capitalism or communism, are contrary to really what a lot of people would prefer. It's just they have products to sell, and they have shaped our culture. We are in the midst of one of the world's most remarkable projects of social engineering. It's our American way of life. And as you say, and others too, that it's not a technical issue. It's a personal, it's a societal issue for choosing a direction, a preferred future. Mark, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you a lot. We've spoken many times, but never on Zoom or in a interview kind of a format. But you have a lot of wonderful perspectives to share. And again, your website is peakchoice.org. And I think that leads to a lot of other content that you have online as well. So I appreciate you being here. Any final comment?
You can get quite lost and spend a lot of time at Peak Choice and the tributary sites, and what can I say? It's an exciting time to be alive.
It is an exciting time to be alive. Okay, thanks, Mark. I appreciate all you've said, all you've shared with us.